The mixing of clay with sand is done in rotary mullers. These are also used for blending the sand itself. Often in the South Amboy district, various sands of different degrees of bonding strength and grain size are blended to make a molding sand suited to particular application. But for years, foundrymen have looked to the Hudson Valley, the storehouse of Albany molding sand. Here, enormous deposits reach from Croton northward for 150 miles. Croton, just below Bear Mountain Bridge, the first place from which Albany sand was shipped. Cold Spring, a few miles farther north, was another of the earliest shipping points. And there, during Civil War days, gun carriages were cast for the Union troops. Catskill is old in the lore of the valley. The Dutch settled there early and gave us the legends of Rip Van Winkle. Today it is one of the most southerly points from which Albany sand is taken. When our country was young, settlers came up this river, pioneers of industry. They took clay from the land and made bricks. They quarried stone. They made cement. And they shipped these out to the world, as we still do today. And on up the river is Albany, still the center of molding sand operations which reach from near Catskill to Gansevoort in the north, 100 miles along both sides of the river. The sand in this area has always been called Albany sand, because, as we know, all of this sand is of the same origin and of similar nature. It was deposited by the same ice sheet. It was worked on by the same wind and water and weathering. In the fields of this valley, there will be a man any day walking through the brush, prospecting for new deposits, looking for new banks to be opened. He carries no elaborate equipment, only a shovel, because the sand lies close below the surface. Perhaps this one is an extensive deposit, averages about 18 inches in depth, is of medium fineness. The prospector moves on to other fields, and a crew moves in to open the new bank. First, the overburden of soil is stripped off down to the bank of bonded sand. The surface is carefully cleaned, and if there is any debris, such as a charred stump, that too is dug out. And when the bank is opened, other problems come up. The sand within each bank may vary in fineness, a fact which requires endless watching, supervision, so that orders are filled as specified. Maybe the order calls for AFA fineness 110. That other part of the bank may average about 120, and this may be coarser. Okay, bring the truck over. Mix it in the field. Load about a third from this part of the bank, and after it's mixed in the screening, the grade will be right. It's done by hand shovel in these Albany banks, and these banksmen have to be good, trained by years of experience. And the men who have charge of these operations have expert judgment. They need a sensitive hand which can tell the sand by its feel, and a man in the field gets that after a while. But in order to make sure, samples are taken from different parts of the banks and sent into the laboratory for testing and grading. Then there's the question that people always ask. What happens to all these fields that are dug up? Does it ruin them for farming? The answer is that the soil is thrown back into the field from which the sand was taken. It is leveled, then plowed and planted again. One of the most important operations here in the Albany banks is the screening. New and better ways are being developed. There are screens that move under their own power. They are used right at the banks and also serve the function of loading the trucks. There are other portable screens which are moved to any location behind a truck. Where it is most efficient, the screens are brought to the sand. In some places, the purpose is better served by bringing the sand to the screens. Large ones at railroad sidings where the sand is screened and conveyed directly into the cars, or put in storage piles for winter shipments. Other permanent screens at other sidings. The flow of sand is off to the foundries of the country, the foundries of other lands, the best known, the most widely used sand in the world. But it wasn't so long ago that men prodded their teams down rutted roads, taking their sand to market. It was slow. You couldn't dig sand very far from the sidings then. It was just too hard to haul it very far. The radius that could be worked was less than a mile, and when they began to use horses, it wasn't much better. The roads continued to improve. Maybe the distance was increased another mile or so, but it wasn't until there were high-speed trucks and high-speed highways that distant Albany banks could be worked at all. Today, the sand comes faster and faster from farther. Comes to the docks at Albany, at Vicious Ferry, at Northumberland, at Jersey, down the Hudson to New York, and on coastal freighters to the south, through the Panama to the west, through the Long Island Sound to New England, up the Champlain Canal to Montreal, through the locks of the Erie to Buffalo, at Buffalo to change from barge to lake freighter, and to the west. 100 years ago, it wasn't as easy to get this sand. 100 years ago, a lot of things were different. 100 years ago, most foundrymen couldn't be sure what kind of sand they were getting. Most could judge pretty well, but could they be sure?
Hello, Charlie. That's a new shipment of molding sand?
Yeah.
How's it look?
Oh, pretty good, I guess. Color looks all right.
The way I tell is whether it feels right. This feels pretty good.
Well, best way I know is throw it. See if it sticks. Someday maybe we'll find a better way.
Yes, there were better ways. Foundry losses in those days ran very high, and the foundry industry was really compelled to devise ways and means whereby not only could production be stepped up, but the quality of castings bettered. And I am proud to say that the practical foundrymen of that day were the first to take up this thing of searching for ways and means to accomplish this. Then, as to the research, one of the first to devote his time and energy to this was Dr. Moldenke, who did a real work in those days. And later on, the American Foundrymen's Association appointed the Molding Sand Research Committee. We all know what valuable work they have done. But among the first, to my recollection, to devise sand testing equipment was Eugene Smith of Chicago with his vibratory test. Then there was the test for the strength of sand or cohesiveness by Ray Doty.
Scientific testing has gone far since those old days. The attempt is to see that the foundryman always gets what he requires. After all, sand is a material which was created by the whims of nature. Each deposit has been laid down under conditions which vary a little from the next. In this attempt to learn exactly what we are dealing with, AFA has set up a number of tests which are standard. Some of these tests are for strength, for moisture, for permeability, clay, and fineness. These are the early ones, but the industry is always looking toward the future. Other tests have come along. There is, for instance, the centering test. Another is the test for measuring hot strength. A specimen is put under a compression load in a furnace until it is crushed. And still another test, which has not been adopted as standard, is a test for expansion. A furnace heated to 2,500 degrees is lowered over the specimen. As the heat begins to affect the sand, the particles of silica expand for a time. But after the heating has gone on for a while, the sands will contract due to the partial fusion of the clay. This change may cause the sand to crack and distort. All of these tests are to find out how different grains of sand react to varying conditions. One important difference is in the shape of the grains. There are 4 types. This is angular. The edges of the subangular grains are not as sharp. There are grains which are rounded and grains which are compound. Here's a practical application. Mexico Bay sand, classed as subangular, but a few grains are rounded.
Today, the foundry industry is truly modernized, and sand research is only one reason for that. To the AFA is largely due the credit for modernizing the industry. It abolished secrecy. It made a strong, united industry. It gave to the industry men who contributed much. These men have made our product better. Our product, which is important to many basic industries and which is vital to the life of the nation. We must continue this progress, this contribution to make our country better.